Welcome to CSS Breakdown, Book by Book Season 4, where we explore the timeless wisdom of Will Durant's Fallen Leaves. In Episode 12, we uncover Durant's inspiring first-hand account of the civil rights era and his bold vision for a more united humanity rooted in harmony, education, and mutual respect.
And our mission today, it's really to take that deep dive, like you said, into it. Right.
Right, we're not just, skimming the surface. We want to pull out those key insights, the ones that still resonate from his personal journey, his philosophy. It's sort of a shortcut, really, to understanding this crucial historical viewpoint.
Exactly, because Durant isn't just reporting here. He's part of the story himself. It's a journey of discovery.
Yeah.
And honestly, it feels surprisingly relevant for today.
That's what's so interesting. We think of Will Durant, the story of civilization, this giant historical work.
Right, the detached scholar.
But here in Fallen Leaves, he's different. He's involved. He talks about being involved in the social side of civil rights since, 1914? He calls himself almost an expert.
Yeah, which is fascinating. It means this isn't just theory. It's grounded in decades of him actually being there, seeing things, thinking things through. It gives his words real weight.
Absolutely. And what's striking, I think, is how honest he is. He admits his own blind spots, how his thinking evolved.
That candor is remarkable. When someone of his stature steps back and says, "Look, I didn't get it all right at first," you really listen, don't you? You see him learning.
So for you listening, what can you expect today? Well, we're going to trace this journey, starting with his really early activism, which might surprise some people.
Then that ambitious movement he co-founded, the Declaration of INTERdependence.
Right, those lofty ideals. But crucially, we're also digging into his later reflections, when idealism bumps up against hard reality.
Yeah, the messy parts, the limitations.
Exactly. And then finally, we'll get to what he ultimately saw as the panacea, his solution for these incredibly deep problems. It's quite an arc.
It really is. From hope to, well, a more sober understanding, but still ultimately a kind of resilience. It shows real intellectual integrity. He doesn't shy away from the difficult stuff.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to go back, way back, to 1914, not some university hall, but the Labor Temple in New York City, 14th and 2nd Avenue.
Right. A very different kind of place. A real hub for working people, lots of discussions, lectures.
And Durant started lecturing there. He says his audiences were diverse, many minorities, as well as a variety of whites. This was his starting point, really getting immersed in that melting pot.
And that's key, isn't it? It wasn't just academic study. He was interacting daily with this diversity. His friends, too, not just the people listening to his lectures.
Yeah, it suggests a real personal engagement, not just like intellectual curiosity.
He was a hands-on education in American pluralism, probably very different from what he'd find in purely academic circles back then.
And it's there in that environment that he has this moment of realization he talks about. Quite candidly, he had this habit, well-meaning, of calling everyone brother.
Sounds nice on the surface, right? Very egalitarian.
Totally, universal fellowship. But then, he says, it hit him that there was something offensively patronizing in my use of that term.
Wow. That's quite an admission.
Isn't it? It's not just an anecdote. It's about empathy, isn't it? Good intentions aren't enough. You have to think about the impact, especially across those social divides. A warning against, just performing allyship.
That really hits home. Because it's true, isn't it? Intending good is one thing, but you have to look at how it actually lands, especially when power dynamics are involved.
Right. Him, a white, educated man, calling maybe an African-American or an immigrant brother.
Yeah, without fully getting their experience, it could feel like glossing over differences, assuming a shared perspective that just wasn't there.
So the fact he could see that his kindness might not feel kind, that shows real humility.
Absolutely. A willingness to learn, even when it's uncomfortable. It makes you trust his later reflections more, knowing he had that capacity for self-correction early on.
So New York laid the groundwork. Some humbling moments, clearly. But it wasn't until he moved to L.A. in 1943 that things became more organized, more ambitious.
Right. The new environment, maybe new connections.
Yeah, and a key figure seems to be Meyer David. Durant speaks very highly of him. Keen mind, educated ear, generous spirit, involved in law, music, civic stuff.
A significant partner. And together they started this formal movement, the Declaration of INTERdependence. Notice the capital Inter.
Yeah, very deliberate, signaled they were serious. This wasn't just Durant's idea anymore. It was a structured effort born from seeing all this civil strife.
And not just in the U.S., right? They saw global implications.
Definitely. Which brings us to their core argument. It was stark, really. Nations and races and creeds must learn to work together or consume themselves in periodical strife.
That phrase, consume themselves in periodical strife, it's chilling. It sets the stakes incredibly high. Not just social justice, but survival.
Yeah, it connects harmony at home directly to peace abroad. Division, left unchecked, leads to destruction. It's a universal warning.
And Durant felt this deeply. He believed his own fervent pen wrote their proclamation of principles.
That phrase, fervent pen, it's not just literary flair, is it? It shows his passion, his deep investment. This was personal for him, a moral thing.
Oh, absolutely. For a writer like Durant, words were tools, powerful ones. He saw his writing as a way to shape understanding, to push for change. It was central to who he was.
Okay, so let's look at those principles, the core of this declaration. He called them reaffirmations of evident truths. First one, that differences of race, color, and creed are natural, and that diverse groups, institutions, and ideas are stimulating factors in the development of man.
That's a big statement for the 1940s.
Right. Diversity isn't a problem to solve. It's natural, and it's actually a strength, a stimulus for progress.
It completely flips the script from the prevailing prejudices of the time, which saw difference as a source of conflict or hierarchy. Instead, they're saying, no, this variety is what makes us richer, smarter, better, very progressive.
Then the next point puts the onus on institutions. That to promote harmony and diversity is a responsible task of religion and statesmanship.
So it's not just about individuals being nice. It's saying, look, harmony doesn't just happen. It needs work.
Yeah.
And the big players, churches, governments, they have a duty to lead that work.
Why single them out, do you think? Religion and statesmanship.
Well, they hold immense influence, don't they? Religion often shapes morality, our sense of right and wrong. And statesmanship sets the rules, the laws, the policies. So targeting them acknowledges this is a systemic issue needing systemic solutions, led from the top.
Makes sense. Then the third principle, which feels so relevant now, that since no individual can express the whole truth, it is essential to treat with understanding and goodwill those whose views differ from our own.
Intellectual humility, empathy.
Exactly. It's basically saying nobody has all the answers. So you have to engage with different views, not just tolerate them, but try to understand them with goodwill.
It's a direct pushback against dogma, isn't it? If you accept you might be wrong, or at least incomplete, then listening to others becomes essential for getting closer to the truth. Wisdom comes from combining perspectives.
And then comes a stark warning from history. That by the testimony of history, intolerance is the door to violence, brutality, and dictatorship.
Yeah, that grounds it all in real-world consequences. It's not just philosophy, it's a historical fact. Intolerance isn't just unpleasant, it leads down a very dark path. Think religious wars, totalitarianism.
So tolerance isn't just a nice idea, it's a necessary defense against societal collapse.
Precisely. It's pragmatic as much as moral. The cost of intolerance is ultimately self-destruction.
And the final principle ties it all together. That the realization of human interdependence and solidarity is the best guard of civilization.
Back to that core idea, interdependence. Recognizing we're all connected despite differences is what protects us. It's the strongest defense against forces that want to pull us apart.
It's not just about avoiding fights, but actually building something better together.
Exactly. Collective flourishing through mutual support. Our fates are linked.
Okay, so those are the big ideas. But the Declaration also had practical commitments, a call to united action. First, to uphold and promote human fellowship through mutual consideration and respect.
So, taking the big ideas down to the everyday, how we actually treat each other. Consideration, respect the basics of decent interaction applied broadly.
Grand principles need daily practice, right?
Absolutely. Otherwise, they're just words.
Then a clear stand. To champion human dignity and decency and to safeguard these without distinction of race or color or creed.
That's the heart of the civil rights push, isn't it? Universal human dignity, non-negotiable. Protected for everyone, period. A direct challenge to the discrimination rampant in the 1940s.
Very bold. And finally, they pledged to strive in concert with others to discourage all animosities arising from these differences and to unite all groups in the fair play of civilized life.
In concert with others, that's key. It's a collective effort, actively fighting prejudice, not just passively tolerating people, and ensuring fair play real equality of opportunity. It's about proactively building unity and justice.
And the Declaration wraps up with this incredibly potent summary. Rooted in freedom, children of a common divine Father, sharing everywhere a common human blood, we declare again that all men are brothers and that mutual tolerance is the price of liberty.
Wow. That brings together everything: American ideals, a spiritual sense of unity, biological reality.
Yeah, and it makes that crucial link. Tolerance isn't just optional, it's the price of liberty. Freedom requires it.
It suggests liberty isn't just granted, it's maintained through how we treat each other. Mutual respect is essential for a free society to actually work. A really compelling endpoint.
So, armed with this powerful declaration, Durant and Meyer-David decided to go big, really big. They organized Interdependence Day for July 4th, 1945.
Turning Independence Day on its head, in a way.
Exactly. And they pulled in some serious star power. Thomas Mann, the Nobel laureate, spoke at a dinner beforehand. And Bette Davis, the actress Bette Davis, took over fundraising from Durant's, quote, amateur hands.
Huh. That's amazing. Having names like Mann and Davis involved must have given them huge visibility. And money, presumably.
Oh, definitely. It signals legitimacy, doesn't it? This isn't some fringe group. It's got backing from major cultural figures. Meyer-Davis connections must have been key there, too.
Absolutely. It amplified their message way beyond typical activist circles.
And they needed that amplification for their main event, a mass meeting at the Hollywood Bowl.
The Hollywood Bowl, that's aiming high.
Right. 18,000 people, he says. Whites, blacks, Christians, and Jews, all gathered together on the 4th of July, reframed as Interdependence Day. Can you imagine the atmosphere?
Electrifying, I bet. Just the visual of that diverse crowd, that size, in that iconic venue on that symbolic day, it's a powerful statement before anyone even speaks. A living demonstration of the harmony they were preaching. Must have felt incredibly hopeful.
And the stage, just as inclusive. Top speakers. Associate Justice Frank Murphy from the Supreme Court came from D.C. Get this, he refused his $1,000 fee.
Wow. That says a lot about his commitment, doesn't it? It wasn't just a speaking gig for him.
Not at all. And alongside him, a Catholic archbishop, a Protestant minister, a rabbi, and a black clergyman, all sharing the platform.
So covering all the major bases, religious, racial, a deliberate symbol of unified moral authority. This wasn't just one group's issue. It was presented as a universal call.
And it wasn't just talk. There was music. Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, and black choirs. First, they sang separately, celebrating their own traditions, and then they sang together in unison.
Oh, that must have been powerful. Perfect metaphor, right? Honoring difference, then finding harmony together. Music hits you emotionally in a way speeches sometimes can.
Yeah, definitely. And the climax. Durant himself gets up and leads the entire crowd, 18,000 people, in reciting the Declaration as a pledge. Right there before a Supreme Court justice.
That's incredible. Turning a rally into a collective public commitment. Binding everyone there to these ideals. Huge ambition. They must have felt they were really changing hearts and minds on a massive scale.
And it seemed like it was working, at least initially. A year later, a big win. The LA Board of Education agreed to put the Declaration in all the schools.
Yeah, it's significant. Getting it into the education system. Reaching kids.
Yeah, making it part of the curriculum almost. And someone, Mrs. H. David Kroll, donated money to frame 1,000 copies for the schools. Real, tangible progress. Institutional buy-in.
That's moving beyond a one-off event. That's embedding the ideas. It must have felt like they were laying the groundwork for real long-term change, planting seeds for the future.
And Durant says at that point, they felt, well, pretty proud. Maybe a bit too proud. He says they felt they'd go down in history on a level with Thomas Jefferson.
Wow. Thomas Jefferson. That's bold.
Isn't it? But it captures their feeling at the time. This immense optimism, this belief that they'd created something truly foundational, like the Declaration of Independence itself.
It really shows the peak of their idealism. They genuinely believed they'd cracked it, set America on a new course, which makes what comes next even tougher.
Exactly. Because here's the turn. Durant notes that after this success, the group kind of relaxed. They started resting on its oars, while outside, racial chaos rose on every side.
Oof, that contrast is brutal. The internal feeling of triumph versus the external reality getting worse.
It's a harsh lesson, isn't it? Symbolic victories are important, but they don't automatically fix deep-seated problems. Complacency is dangerous.
Yeah, it highlights that huge gap between an inspiring event and the ongoing grinding work needed for real systemic change. Success can sometimes blind you, make you think the job's done when it's barely started. It requires constant effort.
And this leads Durant to this incredibly honest self-assessment. He calls himself and Meyer innocent idealists who had never looked into the depths of the racial cauldron.
Racial cauldron. That's a potent image. Suggests something boiling, complex, dangerous.
Right, and admitting they were innocent idealists. That's raw honesty. What does it say about idealism facing really entrenched problems?
It suggests idealism is maybe necessary to start things, but it's not enough on its own if it doesn't grapple with the full, ugly reality. You can't just wish problems away. His admission shows a real maturation, moving from just believing in an idea to understanding the messy human resistance to change.
He then lists specific things they missed. They thought, he says, an annual sermon and song would cool the heat.
Like a yearly event could fix centuries of ingrained prejudice and inequality.
Seems incredibly naive in hindsight, doesn't it? Believing emotional appeals alone could solve structural issues.
It underestimates the sheer power of those structures, economic, political, social. A sermon and song can inspire, sure, but they don't redistribute wealth or dismantle discriminatory laws. They were looking for an emotional fix for a systemic problem.
Another blind spot. Being Northerners, they had never felt the wounds of economic servitude, political disbarment, and social contumely. That last phrase, social contumely. What's he getting at there?
It's a daily grind of humiliation, isn't it? The public scorn, the constant insults, the deliberate disrespect aimed at making you feel inferior. It's beyond just laws, it's the psychological wear and tear.
And not having lived that meant their understanding was limited.
Absolutely. They couldn't truly grasp the depth of the suffering, the trauma, the sheer exhaustion of navigating a constantly hostile world if they hadn't experienced it themselves. It's hard to feel the weight of something you've only observed from a distance.
They also missed, he says, the white man's fear of black power growing in the North. So it wasn't just about the oppressed, but also the anxieties of the dominant group.
Yeah, that's a crucial layer. As demographics shifted in northern cities, it triggered deep fears among some white people about losing control, about the social order changing. Understanding that fear, however irrational, is key to understanding the resistance, the backlash. It wasn't just about policy. It was about identity, power, perceived threats.
And they underrated, he says, the spread and comfortable acceptance of propaganda proclaiming the inherent inferiority of the black mind. This wasn't just fringe lunacy, it was mainstream.
Apparently so. Embedded in culture, maybe even in science and education of the time, a widespread belief system that justified discrimination. If you underrate how deeply that runs, you won't grasp the massive effort needed to counter it. It shapes how people see potential, how they justify inequality.
And a very practical point. They'd never lived in a district where realty values had suffered from minority infiltration, the economics of housing.
Right, a huge driver of tension. The fear, often stoked by racist assumptions and practices like redlining, that black neighbors would lower property values. For many white families, their house was their main asset. That economic anxiety could easily trump appeals to fairness.
Led to white flight, segregation.
Absolutely. Real estate became a major battleground where money and prejudice fueled each other.
Yeah.
A dimension easily missed if you're not directly affected.
And finally, he admits they saw the successful black professionals, doctors, lawyers, and celebrated them. But they missed the bigger picture. The horror of a lynching, the humiliating rejection, the hopeless poverty of Harlem or Watts.
That's the danger of focusing only on the exceptions, isn't it? The model minority idea. Even back then, it can make you overlook the systemic suffering of the majority.
Yeah.
Celebrating the few who make it against all odds shouldn't blind you to the brutality and despair faced by so many others.
And then this really stunning moment of self-awareness, he says they subsided into the unconscious satisfaction of belonging to the locally dominant race. Unconscious privilege.
That phrase, unconscious satisfaction, it's so sharp. And it's not saying they were malicious, but that their position, their privilege, just let them drift, be unaware, because their own lives weren't constantly impacted.
It's a powerful admission that privilege can create a bubble, make you complacent without even realizing it.
And for someone like Durant to admit that publicly, it shows real growth. It makes his later ideas much more grounded, more credible. He's learned the hard way.
So as Durant says, he slowly grew up. The problem itself wasn't shrinking. It was getting more complex, raised its 100 heads. A big part of this was the Great Migration, Black Americans moving from the South to the North. What were they fleeing in the South?
He paints a terrifying picture. The constant threat of violence.
Yeah.
A black man might at any time be killed by a white man who ran little risk of being convicted. Justice was completely skewed.
A rigged system, a climate of terror, really.
Absolutely. And beyond violence, total disenfranchisement, trying to register to vote meant facing impossible hurdles, poll taxes, literacy tests designed to fail.
And even if you managed it,
You'd likely lose your job, maybe your home. Economic retaliation was swift and brutal. Exercising your rights meant risking your survival.
so escape seemed like the only option. And Durant also touches on the white perspective in the South, encouraging this.
Yeah, he mentions the fear of black rule in majority black areas, the racist fears white women held. These anxieties meant the white power structure was often willing to let black laborers leave for the North.
Like exporting the problem.
Essentially, yes. A way to maintain control without addressing the underlying injustices. A twisted kind of calculus involving fear, power, and economics.
So millions head north, dreaming of justice and plenty. What did they actually find?
Often, not what they hoped for. Maybe some work, Durant says, but usually manual labor, low status, still requiring servility, different settings, similar dynamic.
The dream deferred again, and if not work.
Maybe public aid, which then fueled new resentments among northern whites. Fears about welfare dependency, about population growth, alarmed the whites with his fertility, as Durant puts it.
So new prejudices replaced the old ones.
Or layered on top. Economic anxiety, demographic fears. It created a new kind of tension in northern cities, which weren't prepared for this influx or the underlying issues.
And other groups were arriving too, right? He mentions Puerto Ricans coming to New York, making it more diverse, but also leading to white kids becoming a minority in Manhattan schools.
Which fueled more anxiety. These rapid demographic shifts, even if enriching in many ways, were often seen as a threat by the established white population, feeding a sense of displacement.
Leading directly to
White flight. Mass exodus from the cities, New York, Chicago, Philly, to the suburbs.
leaving the cities fundamentally changed, more segregated, fewer resources.
Exactly. It hollowed out the tax base, concentrated poverty, and created the stark urban-suburban divides we still grapple with today. America's greatest cities became, as he says, race-colored and race-conscious.
And the consequences were dire. He talks about wild hostility, unsafe streets.
A breakdown of social order. And white citizens. He says they returned dislike for hate, gave up on civil rights, grew weary, maybe defensive.
A hardening of hearts. And meanwhile, money meant for poverty relief was getting siphoned off by corrupt politicians.
Right. Systemic failure internally.
Yeah.
And externally, he points out that distant war consumed the gold, meant for improving American life. WWII, the Cold War, diverting massive resources away from these urgent domestic problems.
So the problems were multiplying, getting deeper, more complex. And faced with all this, Durant steps back from his earlier confidence. He says, I should be a ridiculous upstart if I pretended to have solutions for all these problems.
That humility is striking, isn't it? After feeling like Jefferson, now he's acknowledging the sheer scale, his own limitations. It makes whatever he does propose feel more earned, more credible.
He sees these problems as rooted deep in the nature of man, our tendency to distrust the unfamiliar, and that chilling line about when the unfamiliar speaks of burning us, we do not warm to the prospect.
That gets right down to primal fear, doesn't it? The fear of the other, especially when perceived as a threat. It helps explain why rational arguments for equality often fail against such deep-seated emotional resistance. It's not just about logic, it's about gut feelings, survival instincts gone wrong.
So does he just give up then? Decide it's hopeless?
No, remarkably he doesn't. He still offers his panacea. But first, he acknowledges the immediate crisis. Technology displacing unskilled labor. His short-term answer. Pure pragmatism. Feed and house those suffering.
Basic human needs first. Compassion.
Right. Address the immediate pain while you figure out the long game.
And that long game, his true panacea,
is education. But not just any education. Extended and expanded education. His vision is massive. Retrain the educable adults and fundamentally educate the children for the future. Prepare the next generation for the new machinery of production, distribution, and finance.
So it's education as a tool for total societal adaptation, preparing everyone for a modern, complex world.
Exactly. It's intergenerational. It's about adaptability, critical thinking, skills for a new economy, not just basic literacy. Equipping people not just for jobs, but for life in a changing society.
And underpinning this whole idea is his absolute belief in human potential. He insists the non-white mind and character are as capable of improvement as any if they aren't held back by a hostile environment.
That's crucial. It's a direct rebuttal to those racist ideas of inferiority he mentioned earlier. He's saying the potential is universal. The problem is the environment, the system that stunts that potential. The responsibility lies with society to fix the environment.
And he saw proof of this potential himself, didn't he?
Yes, he points to the great number of non-whites who have surmounted 1,000 obstacles to reach excellence in all sorts of fields: literature, medicine, law.
So for him, these weren't just exceptions, they were proof. Proof that the capability is there waiting for opportunity.
Precisely. Evidence that if you remove the barriers, excellence can flourish anywhere. It fuels his conviction in education as the key.
So it all comes down to this. Extended and expanded education. What does that really mean, extended and expanded?
Well, extended likely means universal access, quality education for everyone, regardless of background, throughout life, and expanded. That means broader than just the basics. Critical thinking, skills, adaptability, but also, crucially, moral and civic education. How to live together responsibly in a diverse society.
It's a huge undertaking, a total investment in human development.
Absolutely.
Oh,
holistic, not just about economics, but about cultivating capable, thoughtful, engaged citizens.
Now, Durant knew this sounded maybe idealistic. He says, the cynic will smile at this old-fashioned 18th century trust in education.
Yeah, you can hear the cynic, right? Education, that's your answer to riots and hatred. Too slow, too naive, especially when people want immediate fixes.
But Durant's counter is stark. If not education, what's the alternative? His answer, it is a police state.
Oof. That's a chilling choice he presents. Either invest in enlightenment and reason, or rely on force to keep order. If people can't govern themselves through understanding, the state steps in with coercion.
And the future under that police state, he paints it grimly. 100 years of internal hatred, social disorder, uncontrollable violence, and urban decay.
Not just a bad patch, but a century of decline, societal unraveling. It makes education seem less like a nice-to-have and more like an essential for survival. The only way to avoid tearing ourselves apart.
And he connects this internal rot to external threats, too, right?
Yeah, he warns this decay would happen just as global barriers are breaking down when America faces more challenges from growing states and alien ideas. A divided, hate-filled nation can't compete, can't lead, can't defend itself effectively on the world stage.
So internal unity becomes a matter of national security, global standing, another reason education is vital.
Exactly. It elevates the stakes even higher.
And he lands on this powerful moral question. Do we not owe it to conscience and justice that every person, irrespective of their race, has full and equal opportunity to enter into the promise of American life?
That brings it right back to core values.
Yeah.
After all the complexity, the pragmatism, the warnings, it's an appeal to America's fundamental ideals. Are we living up to them? For everyone. It's a question that still hangs in the air today.
It really does. And that wraps up our journey through Durant's thinking on this in Fallen Leaves. What a journey it is from that initial, almost blinding idealism.
Right, the Jeffersonian pride.
To this really sober, pragmatic understanding of just how deep the problems run, how complex human nature is. But still, holding on to that core belief in education, it's such a unique, honest perspective from inside that era.
It really is. That evolution is key. He learned that inspiring gestures aren't enough. Real change takes long-term, deep investment in people. His vision, harmony, education, respect, it still feels urgent. And that solution, education, sounds simple, but the commitment it requires, it's immense.
Absolutely. So, as we finish, here's something for you, our listener, to think about. Durant went from innocent idealist to someone who saw the depths of the challenges. What do you see as the biggest hurdle to fostering harmony and respect in our world today?
And thinking about Durant's panacea, extended and expanded education, where are the real opportunities now? Where could education make the biggest difference in bridging the divides that still seem so deep, maybe even, as Durant hinted, rooted in our nature? How do we build that more resilient society he hoped for?